Welcome back to the Command Your Brand Show. I'm your host, Josh Silvestro, brand ambassador of Command Your Brand. So in this episode, I actually have a very special guest speaker coming all the way from Canada, which is probably really cold at this time as you're listening to this. She's actually a CEO and founder of her own publishing company called LeadHer Publishing. She's also an author, and she's actually had it become a bestseller book. So I'd like to introduce you guys to Courtney. So Courtney, thanks for coming to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I love talking about publishing and just everything to do with books. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of interesting too. And we'll go into this is like, a lot of people as CEOs and founders want to make a book, but sometimes they just don't have the time. So I guess as the first question, we'll go into that later, but as the first question, I guess for people who don't know who you are, could you give us a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you kind of started the company that you have today?
Yeah, for sure. So my name's Courtney, and I'm the founder of LeadHer Publishing. I have always wanted to be an author. Since I was a little girl, I was writing books when I was really small in notebooks first. And then in like 1998, when we finally got a computer, I was typing away and trying to write stories there too. And I always had this goal of becoming an author, but very well-intentioned, well-meaning authority figures, my parents, my teachers, they're all like, maybe you shouldn't try to be an author. Like, it's kind of hard to do that. It's difficult. Not everyone gets picked as an author. So I was even encouraged to like not go into print journalism or journalism in my university, but to go into something more broad and to do something like not to become an author, because they thought that was just too difficult. And to be fair, back then, 20, 25 years ago, like the only way was traditional publishing, and it was a lot more difficult. There's a lot more gates you need to pass through, a lot more hoops you need to jump through in order to get a publishing deal. So I kind of let it slip away and worked in a corporate environment in the fitness industry for almost 14 years.
Wow.
Still doing writing for fun. I was actually writing and contributing for their blog in the department where I was a manager for. I was also contributing to their internal magazine on a quarterly basis. Not because I was getting anything extra for those things, just because I love writing and I wanted to do it. And it was a fun passion thing for me. And then I started to kind of shift away from the corporate life and wanted to move into something else around the 2017 mark. I was a new mom. I had a 2-year-old. And I had gone back to work. There were some changes there. And I just thought, I've always wanted to write a book. I think I'm going to see if I can pursue that now. And I was building a different brand, which was all about self-love and motherhood and confidence. And I started with a self-love journal. And when I did that, my intention was to help other women who were following my platforms and who were benefiting from the information that I was sharing and wanted more. And I had gained a lot of improvement through journaling. And so I wrote down the things that I was asking myself every day, journaling, and I created that resource for others. And then what I didn't expect was that people started asking me how I did the publishing part. Like they were like, great, I got the journal, I'm using it, cool. But they wanted to know how they could create a journal or how they could write a book. And so it really organically sort of happened from there. I didn't intentionally mean at first to start a publishing agency, but I realized there was this need for women to get resources, support, guidance, and potentially even someone who could do it for them. And so LeadHer Publishing was born out of helping women entrepreneurs try to self-publish their work and get published on Amazon and become best-selling authors.
Yeah.
So it started really from when I was a child. I always wanted to be an author. And now I have the privilege and the honor to help women become authors. They've had a dream, whether they've been dreaming since they were a kid or it's a dream they've had for 2 years or 5 minutes. I can help them to achieve that goal and hit the milestone and then use their book to leverage their business, grow their presence, grow their credibility and their platform. So feels really full circle to be now helping others to do it when it was a dream of mine for so long. And I truly love what I do every day. I'm so lucky to do it.
Yeah, it sounds a lot of fun too, because I know some friends of mine have definitely written books, and like some of them were self-published, some of them were just from a big publisher. What do you find, people who have companies and they're like, oh, I don't really have a lot of time, or I don't see a really worth value to it. What value do you find for business to have like their own book or they're writing their own book? What value do you find in that?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is that writing a book is not for everyone. And I know that can sound counterintuitive. I'm a publishing company. You'd think I'd want to be like, yeah, everybody write a book. But you really have to be the right person to create something that is going to be helpful for your audience, because you don't just want to write any old thing and slap it out into the world and just be like, I wrote a book and that's it. If you want to truly create this leverage with your business, establish yourself as an expert, subject matter expert in your field to get the word out more into an international platform, even more so than just in the circle that you've built, maybe with social media or maybe, within your network. It allows you the ability to create this expert environment to give people a lot of value for a kind of low ticket price, but also get people to get to know you, because it creates a ripple effect where if people love what you're saying, they love how you're saying it, they love your, your presence inside your book, it's going to lead them to want to be even closer to you. So that lends itself well to expansion and scaling your business in other ways. It's never just about the book. It's always about opening the door with the book. And then there's 30 more doors that are there behind that first door. And you can really create a custom plan, a custom design for how you want your book to speak for you and in what ways, whether you generate, keynote presentations based off of your book and you lead that into a great speaking career as a pillar of your business, or you're using it as a sort of top of funnel marketing tool that helps people to get to know you. And it's a really easy, I'm going to buy that book, especially if it's nonfiction. They just want to know the information. If you've got great marketing and you've got the information, they won't care about you as an author yet, but once they get to know you in your book, they will. And that really lends itself well to that community building, the network building, and just creating more opportunities for you in your business.
Yeah.
So I see it as such a boost for your subject matter expert status, industry expert status, as well as credibility for you. And it's almost like the ultimate business card. Like I usually work remotely, usually from home, but when I'm out and go to co-working spaces or I'm out working in a coffee shop, I always keep my book with me, because if I happen to run into someone or have a conversation about self-publishing, I'll give them my book and just say, here you go, take this. Because if you're interested in self-publishing, it's going to help you to learn all of the things and get to know a little bit more about the process. Yeah. So you can customize that for whichever industry you're in and whatever makes the most sense for you.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things too is like some people write a book about their self, like as why they started the company or who they are. But some people write a book because of a company or what the company is. Like, for example, like a Command Your Brand, for example, we have our own book called the Command Your Brand book, which actually just goes about what podcasting is, how it works and all that stuff. You know what I mean? And I guess for people who have businesses, what do you find is the trick to actually writing the book? Because some people, I think they don't know what to put down or what they should leave out, what they shouldn't leave out. And I think just it's more the content of what they put in. What do you find is the secret sauce that you can say about it?
Yeah, this is a great question. I love this question.
Yeah.
Because there are people who kind of lose sight of the fact that when you're writing a book, yes, it's about you, but there are two people involved. It's you and it's the person who's picking up your book when it's done. So you can't focus only on your story, your experiences, what you've done, your accomplishments, your milestones. You have to blend your personality and your experiences with the material that you're teaching for the benefit of others. Mm-hmm. If it is just me, this is what I did, this is what I know, this is my story, that can work in some ways. If you're a big, huge leader or celebrity and people just want to know the background of your life, those can be interesting books too. But if you're someone who is building a business, you're an entrepreneur or startup, whatever, you have to blend the personal with the tangible, real information. Of course, I'm talking about nonfiction here. Publishing process is the same whether you write fiction or nonfiction, but because we're a business and we're on a show that's about commanding your brand, I'm assuming most people would be considering nonfiction writing. Yeah. So you need to blend your experiences, vulnerability, and just like what you've gone through personally. But I suggest a format where you share information, you open up the topic, let's say in one chapter, then you have a story or a metaphor or something else to help sort of punctuate and explain what you're just talking about. And then you circle back and close the topic off. Of course, it's a very simple way to write a chapter. But when you can blend the tangible, logical information with something personal, humans love stories. They're going to love reading your experience, taking what you just said and putting it into context so that I can now see it and understand how it makes sense for me as the reader. I guess my recommendation would be always consider who is my reader, who's my ideal reader. Yes, there's probably going to be lots of different types of readers, but the primary person I'm thinking of, right? Think of that person. What are they going to get by virtue of reading your book, by getting the information in your book? They should have some sort of outcome or process results or something that they're going to pull from the material. It can't just be a story about, what you've done in your life. It has to be a blend of both the tactical kind of stuff and also personality, because that's what's going to make your book different than just some, textbook style AI generated book that I know is happening now more and more in the world. Put your personality into it, but also share what you know and teach people what you know in a very accessible way.
Yeah. And I guess there's obviously tools out there that help people give ideas, but I always find it's the weirdest thing when people, they have a thing, I forget their names. They're a twin brothers that sell what's called ghostwriting on Amazon. It's like they sort of generate AI to have a generated book and then it sort of just makes money for them. So I kind of love the fact that you're putting into a personality into a book because like no one really wants to talk to a robot. They want to talk to a human being. You know, you got to put life into something with it. So I really appreciate that what you were talking about, how you have to put life in a lot of these chapters, what you're reading and who's reading it. And I think it's all part of the big picture.
That's truly what's going to differentiate you. Even if you think about branding and using social media, there's so much information about like, you know, marketing, for example. I could just regurgitate information about marketing and put that on my social channels. But what's going to make me the brand that people want to work with if I'm a marketing agency is my personality, my experience, that I'm funny, that I maybe swear, that I, you know, the things that you put into your brand that make you and authentic to you. People don't want, and people are starting to be able to tell the AI generated stuff. There's a time and a place for AI. And as an author, there's definitely ways you can utilize AI to help bolster your efforts. But I think if we're losing the personality, we're just going to have the same material regurgitated over and over again. And I actually did some research on this because I, of course, have my book authorized, and that details how to write a nonfiction book and put it on Amazon from start to finish. Mm-hmm. But I also tested an AI platform and wrote a book about self-publishing with the AI tool. And it's just the difference is so noticeable. Like the information is technically the same kind of information, but the way it's positioned is just very mechanical. And there's a lot of repetition, and it's nothing. You might as well just Google it yourself if you're going to read a book that's generated by AI, because there's no personality. And if we lose that, books will just not be the same if we don't have the real people who are participating in the process of writing. Yeah. So that's my 2 cents on it.
I mean, I love reading books. Like, I don't know what kind of books you're into. Like, you know, there's the author type books, but like people are more interested in how they can help themselves with things. Like, I don't know if you ever read like, you know, I've read like the 10X rule. I've read like, I think it's called Rich Dad. I think it's, if I remember, that's what it's called. Like, there's different books about different things, you know. I think The Psychology of Money, another example, right? So how, is there also a way to position your book? Because sometimes people, I think, also have a hard time positioning their book to a certain audience.
Yeah. So in the examples that you gave, we kind of have these big people, like I think it's Robert Kiyosaki or something, that Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that book, right?
Yeah.
So he was a big name. People knew him, and creating a book was a smart decision. He probably, you know, with a traditional publishing agency, he was already famous and already a celebrity. Usually, as a self-published or indie author, you're not going to be super well, like you might be well known in your own community. You might have a good platform already established, but you're probably not like Robert level, like famous. Everybody knows his name. And, you know, so that would have been a great move for him to do a book. He's already had his fame, but you can use your book to create more interest and more awareness about you and your brand by positioning your book, as you said, properly. And the one thing I would suggest here is, it's very tempting when you're writing your own book. Let's say you have a brand and your brand name is something cute and clever. And this is like a personal example from myself that I will explain a little bit further. Yeah. If you name your book in alignment with your brand, it makes it nice and neat and pretty and matches your branding. But for exposure and searchability, if you're on Amazon, it does not make sense to have a title that just matches your brand, because on Amazon, you're trying to leverage that platform to reach new people so that they come into your world. So for example, the brand I mentioned earlier when I was doing, you know, motherhood and confidence and all of that, first book I wrote, nonfiction book, was called Momfident as F. I don't know if we swear on this show, but it was called literally Momfident as F. And that was my like debut book. And at the time I was not thinking big picture. I was thinking I'm helping the people in my community. I had a pretty, you know, decent sized Instagram following. I was like building it. This was around 2018, 2019. I wasn't thinking big picture. I just thought, I want to write a book. I've had a goal for years. I did the journal thing first, and I'm finally publishing this book. What would have made more sense, because the average person does not know this term, momfident. Who knows that term? Only people if they knew me on social media and had already met me. Right. Nobody is searching for that on Amazon. Nobody's searching how to build momfidence. Like no one, not a soul. Unless they already knew me and they just were going to Amazon. What would have been far smarter is if I was a lot more straightforward and less clever and cute and just more like strategy focus and called it Confident as F, because and then I could embed that with keywords and search terms that were all about maybe motherhood and confidence. And then inside the book, I could mention also have a brand. It's called Confident as F, Confident AF, whatever, and direct the new people to go there and then join my community, my space. Right. So positioning your book properly is less about the fluffy, cool, cute, align it perfectly with your brand name and all your terms. You can introduce all that stuff in the book, but on the outside, simpler is better. More straightforward and concise is better. You can use your subtitle to be search friendly as well. If you want your title to be like Command Your Brand, for example, that's actually great. It has your brand, brand right in there, but leveraging your subtitle to be like super searchable. What is your ideal person who might pick up this book, your ideal reader? What are they typing into the Amazon search bar or YouTube search bar or Google? And try to put that into the title of your book. And then obviously, book cover design is another thing. I could talk for hours about that, but you want to make sure it's captivating, it's clear, it fits in the genre that you're in, and can also stand out in, an overly saturated place at times, right? Depending on what category you're in.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure you are positioning yourself well for a potential person to find you who may never know you, like hasn't known you yet. And think about that when you're starting your marketing.
Yeah. And I guess for people who are listening, like I know a lot of people have also small businesses too, but they want to get out there more. Is there actually, and I think one of the things people have is like the fear of actually getting it, like their book and writing a book and how much time it takes. Is there actually, like obviously you've mentioned a lot of pros. Are there also cons to it too? Or do you think it's just all cons?
If you, cons to writing a book, if you hate writing, then writing a book is not for you. Unless you're going to hire somebody. I have a colleague that I work with all the time who co-writes books for people. So you would share your story maybe in this way, verbally, and then she would put an outline together and then she would craft it and you would just kind of review it and approve it. Of course, that is going to come with a higher investment. If you enjoy the process of writing and I can get you to a place where I know you know what you're going to write and you have an outline for like, let's say 10 things you're going to write about in this nonfiction book, then it just becomes a matter of showing up for yourself and writing. And one thing I like to instill for people so they remove some of the fear that comes along with writing a book is that your book does not have to be 100,000 words. It doesn't have to even be 80,000 or 50,000 words. It could literally be 15,000, 20,000. And if you break that down by chapter, you're looking at, potentially 2,000 to 3,000 words per chapter. It does not have to be as massive. It does not have to be a book that's 500 pages long, as long as it serves a purpose. And to be honest, the way that humans are now and how our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter, I'd actually encourage you, and I do, to write a shorter, concise, straightforward book. If you want to expand later, you could write a second book and then you'd have two. And then if you want to write more, write a third book, because people want the quick wins. They want the satisfaction of finishing the book and actually learning from it what they came to learn about it. If you try to write a book that encompasses everything you've ever learned in your career and your life, it's just going to be a higher chance that people don't finish it. And I want them to finish it, get to the end, feel like they took something away from it and rave about it because they loved what you said. And they had this feeling like they learned something in the book. They accomplished something by reading it. So don't let the length stress you out. Try to get as clear as possible with the message, the outcomes, the results that you're hoping this reader is going to get. And then structure it like, how do I want to put this? How am I going to organize it? If it's a book on manifestation, because you're a manifestation coach, obviously, the first thing that you're going to put in there is like, what even is manifestation? Like you have to start at the beginning and be logical about it and then share what you know, embed the stories and the purpose behind what you're doing. But it doesn't have to be a huge project. So, but you do have to be a person who likes writing because otherwise the process will suck and you just probably will never do it. Just keep pushing it off.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting too that you mentioned is like you have to be really, really interested in writing. It's like almost like because I know you're a mother. It's like you have to, for you to have a kid, you have to actually want the kid. You know what I mean? Like you actually have to want to actually do,
and it's a lot of work, as is having a child.
I would assume so. So. It's like, some people are like, oh, but I'm a mom and I have like, 2 kids and I don't know if I don't have time to write a book. And it's like, how do people write books like with your time? Because I'm actually kind of curious, where did you find the time to do it?
So it's interesting with the first book that I had, both books, obviously I was a parent at the time. The first book took me about 4 years to write, the Confident AF book. I started it. I didn't have a very clear plan. Like I said, at the time I was brand new. I wasn't running a publishing company. I wasn't thinking big picture about the book. So I just kind of wrote them almost like blog posts because I had a blog too. That's kind of where I started with my platform. Kind of like blog posts, tips about confidence, just things that I've experienced, suggestions, about confidence building and how you can, learn to love yourself more.
Yeah.
And that one took me a while because I started it, I got momentum, and then I lost momentum and then just kind of sat on my desktop collecting virtual dust for like almost 4 years. And then I went to a conference in San Diego in 2019. And that conference was like the catalyst that inspired me to be like, oh my gosh, I know exactly how I need to finish this book. And so the 5-hour flight home, I pretty much wrote the second half of the book on that 5 hours when I had no internet and nothing else to do but sit there and type. So motivation can come in different bursts. It's obviously not a strategy I would suggest to people. Like start it and then wait 4 years and then on a plane ride, write the rest of it in 5 hours. Like perfect. That's not what I would suggest to anyone. But what I would say is you need to lean into like your productivity style, your energy type. I don't know how spiritual this show is, but there are things like Gene Keys and human design and all of those things that for me, I know, in experience, play a role for me. I'm in human design. I'm a projector. That means I don't have hours and hours long of energy that I can be doing things all day long. I have to be very strategic about where I'm placing my time.
Right.
So for me, it was on a weekly basis. I needed to go somewhere when I was, during the good time, like good period of time where I know I'm most productive. And you have to learn these things about yourself. Go to a coffee shop with the only intention of sitting there and working on my book for those 1 to 2 hours every week. And then that helped me to create the habit. Because if you can create the habit, even if I wasn't writing 10,000 words each time I sat down, but I was sitting there writing a few sentences, at least I'm creating the habit of writing. And that's more important than how much writing you get done during the time that you're writing.
Yeah.
So for you, if you're an entrepreneur and a busy mom, you might have to get up half an hour earlier and do your writing then, and then start your day, or stay up a little bit later once the kids are down and, put that half an hour in on an evening, on a weekly basis, at least a few times a week. But it really depends on your schedule, your productivity, how you work best. And motivation will be there some days and it won't on other days, but you have to just create the habit. That's the most important part.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I don't know how you guys do it. I really don't. Honestly, I think I'm going to write a book about how moms are amazing and we underestimate them.
We got a lot up here. There's a lot going on in the brain at all times. That's the mental overload of everyone's schedules and who's doing what and when and the appointments and how much groceries we have and what groceries we need. And it truly is sometimes I'm blown away by being in the grocery store even and just seeing I know we need that because it's all up in here,
Yeah.
Whereas my husband goes to the grocery store, he'd be like, I don't know what's in the pantry. I have no idea what we need. I don't know. There's so much sitting up here.
Yeah.
So it's a lot, but it's possible. You just have to figure out what works best for you and show up for yourself. That's really it, because it's not going to write itself.
Right. So I guess on the publishing end side, because I know on your business, that's mostly what you focus on. What is the actual difference between self-publishing and regular publishing? I guess that's my first question.
Yeah. So traditional publishing is the style of publishing that you see in the media, that you've seen people get book deals and they get signed by an agent and they get picked up by a publisher. Usually it's book advances and fancy parties and a lot of stuff that they're taking care of for you.
Yeah.
And that was the only way for a really long time. With self-publishing, essentially all of the things that need to be done to get your book to turn into an actual book, you have to do yourself. Or you can hire someone like me to do it for you. But you have to get it edited, obviously. The more editing, the better, because that is something that is kind of noticeable with self-publishing, is that it sometimes is not the best quality because people will skimp trying to save money on, not getting an additional editor or not doing a proofread because I get it. They're trying to save money, right?
Right.
There's lots of other things I could say about that part because I actually have lots of opinions, but you have to get all of the things edited, the interior design, which there are free and cheaper ways to do it than having a graphic designer do it. But working with a graphic designer is the best way because they know what they're doing and they're going to create a beautiful interior for you. Same with cover design. There are ways you can do it cheaper. There are ways you can do it yourself, but I would say if you're going to spend the money on something, use a cover designer versus just trying to guess at your own cover because there's certain things that go into different covers. Again, genre-based, primary audience-based, all of that kind of stuff goes into it. So you're doing it all on your own. It means you're like the project manager. You have to find your editor. You have to find your designers. And then there's the getting it on Amazon part. So you either have to find someone to help you or figure out how to load your book and be strategic about the book listing and all of the things that are included in there for, hopefully for better reach and awareness and exposure. So you need to have your book done and written, take it through the editing process, do the cover design, get the interior formatted so it fits properly. It can't just be a Word document. You have to have it formatted properly. And then you have to get it on Amazon. So you have to fill out, it's kind of, if you're good with tech, it shouldn't be difficult. But if you're not great with tech, it can be a little bit complex.
Yeah.
With Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing. There are other publishing platforms. Amazon is generally the one that I use. There are other places you can go. It doesn't have to be there. And then you're, hopefully not going to have any errors come back. You're hopefully not going to have any tech stuff that they're saying, you got to fix this and adjust the trim and push the margins out and fix the bleed. It can be a little overwhelming sometimes. And so doing all of that on your own and on your own dollar is the difference really between self-publishing and traditional. Although there's hybrid publishing now where it's kind of a blend between the two. Mm-hmm. There's, traditional publishing agencies that are not like the big six, the ones everyone knows, Penguin, Random House, Simon & Schuster, all of those ones. So there's some agencies that do it a bit different. You may not get as big of a book advance. You may have to pay back your book advance in book sales once the book is live. One of the big differences for sure, though, is the contrast between how much royalties you will make per book with a traditional versus the royalty percentage that you make as a self-published author, because you make way more as a self-published author with it in your name and not going via a traditional publishing company.
Yeah.
And that's like fact. The percentages vary, but it is truly a fact that especially if you have a big presence already, a lot of people get tempted by traditional publishing because they think that might be like the ticket, But if you already have a following and you already communicate to your audience what you're doing and they like, know, and trust you and want to buy from you, probably going to have a better return on investment anyway in going the self-publishing route.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Yeah. I'm actually kind of curious because also too, I don't know if you've got to know this, like Barnes and Nobles, I don't know if they carry self-publishing books or they carry just regular in-house books.
Yeah, they do. Most of my clients, it's a question of third-party distribution. So you get it on Amazon. And then if you're like, okay, so in Canada, where Indigo, Chapters Indigo is like your Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
But they're a kind of sister company. So as long as you can get on third-party distribution, so the platform that I usually use is called Ingram Spark. So independent authors can use that as well. As long as you get it set up there, generally that's where they'll pull the catalog of books from. And then you would want to make personal inquiries to your local Barnes and Noble, for example, to say, hey, I have my book. It's set up on third-party distribution. I'd love to get some copies in store. And they'll usually entertain local authors' books in physical stores first. If your book flies off the shelves and in all kinds of Barnes and Nobles across America or Indigo in Canada, people are going in and asking for the book, they'd likely entertain expanding it to have it in other places too, but they can't possibly do that right off the hop for every indie author because there's just so many books, right? So they love supporting local authors. They'll put it on the shelves in store. I'd say 90% of my authors that I work with have an interest in getting it on the shelves. And so we go about it that way with the third-party distribution. The other 10% just don't care. They just have it on Amazon and they're like, it's fine with me.
Yeah.
But that is also a great way to build in doing, book signings and getting more exposure at in-person events by partnering with a big box store that can help get your message and your book and your name out in your community spaces too.
Yeah.
So that was a long answer to say, yes, you can have it at Barnes & Noble.
Yes. So for people who are let's say, because some people I have that are listening are CEOs and founders of their own company, or maybe they're thinking about starting their own company. Do you think it's wise for people to have their business first, then write it? Or do you think they should write the book first and then start a business?
Off the top of my head, my first suggestion would be you want your business established first, because if you're going to write a book, what happens if in 2 years you decide to change lanes and do something different and you're not running that business anymore? It's not that the book isn't going to be valuable, because its value can still stand. But I also think there's definitely value to you being an owner or a founder or something with this experience and education. Even if you just started the business today and then in 2 years you're starting to work on the book, but you had experience in marketing for 10 years and then, you just decided to start your business, that doesn't mean your experience isn't valid, right? You still have all that experience. But I wouldn't start with the book, because the book is obviously, if you're self-publishing, going to be a bit more of an investment. It's one that you can get a return on, sometimes quickly and sometimes over a bit of time. It's definitely going to be an income generator for you, but it's probably not the first place that I would put I didn't write the authorized book that I have, even though I'm a company on self-publishing, until about 3 years in. From fully running my agency. I had the other books that I had done, and I was working on writing a book about self-publishing. But to me, it was more, I need to, more client experiences, more successes, more wins, more time working on this business before I'm now investing my energy into writing a new resource. Of course, you can do it anytime you want. If you're brand new and you want to write a book because you just want to, absolutely. You can insert it any time in the process. But I guess in a general response, I would say I would wait first, establish yourself as a brand, build that up for a little bit first, and then start writing your book. Writing the book is free, so you can write it to your heart's content. It's only when you want to turn it public, so it's a public medium, that it's going to take a bit of an investment on your part.
Now, this may be something you might know, or maybe this is like a mystery I always find. Is there a sweet spot in how many pages a book should be in, especially a book like that you're talking about? Obviously you mentioned the book shouldn't be 500 pages, obviously it shouldn't be probably 2 pages either, but is there a sweet spot that you find with books, if it's just the right amount of pages and the right size for the book for be wow, this is an easy read? Is there one that you found was the best? This is an interesting question, because when there's certain
there's certain parameters, I guess, that you could follow. If you write a certain amount of words, you can also modify the size of the font, the spacing between the font to extend or to shorten the page count. I would say aim for around 200 pages. So, of course, a 200-page book. So my authorized book is about 250. My word count was about 50,000. And then I also was just moderate on the spacing. I'm not doing huge spacing. I think it's single spaced inside that book. The font is a regular size 12 font. If I was like, I want this book to be bulkier and thicker, which I don't recommend because then your print cost for your book is going to be higher the bigger the book is. If I wanted to make it thinner, I could make the final trim size of the book bigger. So there's standard trim sizes. If you picked up any book, they're probably either 5x8, 6x9, 5.5 by 8.5. So there's some things you can manipulate to adjust if your book's looking like it's going to be too thick or too thin. But I would say 200 pages is a good place to be. If you're doing all of the standard stuff, standard spacing, standard fonts, standard layout, you're not adding a whole bunch of extra stuff, probably at 30,000 to 40,000 words is going to hit you at those standards for about a 200-ish page book. But of course, there's so many different circumstances, so many different like variables at play. But there's ways to adjust it, modify it, tweak it. If you're thinking this looks a little flimsy, I want to bulk it up, you can do that if you need to.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And I guess my last thing is, just because I'm kind of curious, so you've obviously helped so many people with their lives and like publishing and writing and editing and everything. What do you find are the most common mistakes people do in their actual writing? And like when people come to you and they ask, oh, can you fix this or can you do this for me? What are the most common things people come to you and be like, this is a problem?
The most common thing is something we've actually already touched on once before, and that is making your book all about you. Me, and not relating it to, okay, but how does that help the person reading the book? Number one thing I see. And so we have lots of conversations about this section here. I understand what you're trying to do, but we always, in every chapter, in every paragraph, we need to be thinking, how does this help the person reading the book? Right. Because at the beginning, you're not thinking strategically in that way. You might just be thinking, I got to get my story down. I got to get my information down. So by far, that is the number one thing we have lots of conversations about. We modify things and change things based on that. How is this helping the person that's reading the book? And if you can't answer that question because it's just me part, we need to insert the learning, the takeaway, the benefit, the thing that you took from this experience, and not just end it with, and this is what happened to me, period. It has to be, this is what happened to me, this is what I learned, and you could consider blah, blah, blah. So that's probably the biggest mistake that when I get indie authors, whether they're halfway through the writing or they're already done, we have to like go back and look at that and make sure we know who we're speaking to and what they're going to get out of it.
Right. And from your experience, because I know you've helped also people in businesses and you've done a lot of work with people. Can you give me like an example, like a success that you've had, like you've helped someone that you can think of that was just like, wow, I helped this person and just it changed their life completely?
Oh, there's been so many people who have incredible stories that just wanted to put their story into the world to help other people. It's usually what people come to me, right? They have something that they want to share, that they want to help other people with. Recently, I just had a client who is a police officer, and she decided to, at first, she wanted to do a very bare bones police officer journal, like just open space for them to reflect. Because as you know, and if you're working in policing, you can see a lot of very difficult things, and it can be really hard, especially with some of the stigmas around being this, tough persona as a police officer. It can be really hard to not compartmentalize things when you're on the job, seeing difficult things and then being like, well, I can't tell my family because it's horrifying. And, how am I supposed, I need to maybe talk to a therapist, or like, what do I do? And there's a lot of stigmas about that in itself, talking to a therapist, journaling, because it's a lot of, I don't want to stereotype, but there's a lot of kind of macho-y kind of personalities because you have to have that persona if you're going to be in policing. So this is a female police officer, and she created a journal or resource specifically for police officers to be able to get out, what happened on their shift for their own mental health, and provides resources and suggestions and tips for how to use journaling to release some of that trauma that they're experiencing on the job. And, she was relatively unknown. She's done a great job in talking about her book. She's done a lot of speaking opportunities. Her book has helped her to meet more people and to be able to help more officers, not just her and her husband, who are both officers, but all of the people in her division, and outwardly in a massive ripple effect. So she started with, I just want somewhere for people to share. And then she started, I'm like, well, why don't we write in here why you're creating this, who you're creating this for, what the purpose of the journal is. And so it expanded into a more detailed book that has journaling as an element. And that she has seen great success, not only just with the book sales, but with the impact that she has in doing speaking opportunities, meeting new people, putting the book in stores. So yeah, that one was really powerful. Someone in actually a couple people in my family are police officers, and I know their stories of things that they have seen and how difficult it can be to come home after that and not either have someone to share it with because you don't want to traumatize your partner.
Yes.
It's a difficult job to be in. So that was a really, really powerful one, not only for her and sharing and feeling so meaningful, getting that out there, but it's helped so many people already.
Yeah, that's such a fascinating thing because, like, I also listen to podcasts and I listen and I read things, and it's like, just with that story, I have a personal connection because I have friends who were police officers, like especially during 9/11 and other areas. That's where I'm from. It's from the New York, New Jersey area, and especially New York City specifically is a very hard time to be a police officer. So I kind of duplicate like, wow, that. I can see that's such a powerful message the person just did just to write a book about about being a police officer and her experience with that. So that was very interesting.
Yeah. So she took her experience and what she knows to be true for her and for her partner as well, and put it out for other people. Similar to when I said I had a self-love journal that I used for myself, and then I shared it with the intention of helping other people. You can get really specific and niche into who you want to help.
Yeah.
And it's so much better, just like really with business as well. You talk about that with marketing, right? You niche down more. It makes it much easier for people to be like, that book is for me. So at first she wanted to do a journal for first responders, which would have been beautiful as well. But when we discussed it further, I was like, I'd rather you say this is for police officers, because then first responders are like, I don't know, is that me? I work in this segment. I don't really know if that's for me. Maybe it's for these other people. But when it says police officer, if I know I'm a police officer, that's for me. I'm going to get it.
Right.
So getting more specific about who you're helping is actually going to work in your favor. It's like big fish in a small pond.
Yeah.
Versus the opposite.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate the time that you kind of given us in this interview. I know we kind of went a little above, but it was really nice talking to you and actually kind of know a little bit about being an author. Because, I think a lot of people want to be authors and want to write their own books and they want to create something. Because I feel like it's such a, I don't know what it is, but about writing things down is like such a relief almost. Like you feel there's like a spiritual part of it, just like getting it all out. And like now people know about it. It's like such a fascinating thing. I don't know. Something about it is so fascinating to me, just how the whole action of just writing a whole book and just publishing it and like getting it known to people is like very, very powerful.
It can also be kind of like legacy building, right? You're putting something into the world that could potentially be lasting for a very long time. And so putting your work out there and being proud of something that you've written that can help people for years to come is a really empowering feeling.
Totally. And of course, I really appreciate the time that you kind of given me and I'm asking you the question, you answering the questions on what we talked about on how to publish a book, what's the difference between self-publishing and regular publishing. And just, I think a lot of people who are listening would appreciate what you kind of given people here on how to publish, because I think people want to, but they don't know how to. And so, and for people, I want people to connect with you and just kind of get to know a little bit more about yourself. Maybe they want help with publishing, or they want to, do it themselves and they want help figure that out. Where's a good place to reach out to you and just to kind of find and connect with you?
Yeah. Easiest, best place would be my website. It's just LeadHerPublishing.com. Of course, you can have access to all my socials there. You can find my book and more information about my book there. I have a membership community for people writing books, working on books, want to self-publish. And there's a lot of free resources there too. So you'll see the freebies tab if you go to the website, and you can get a bunch of free stuff too if you're just dipping your toe in and want a little more information.
That's awesome. Well, I really appreciate the time, and I thank you for joining us. And I thank everyone obviously for listening to this podcast. And if you guys like this stuff, just please let me know. And I definitely want to talk to you guys. And if you guys want to check out her book too, I think I would like to check out her book. And I definitely, if you guys are interested also in podcasting, we also have a book too called the Command Your Brand book. Definitely check it out on our website. And of course, we'll see you guys next time. And I thank you, Courtney, for joining the show.
Thanks for having me. Had a great time.